Hey, I'm JuteLoops, and I'm going to show you how I make move renders for Guilty Gear Strive without getting colored halos around moves and effects. You're going to need two things. First, you have to install the black screen mod for the forest stage, which will be linked in the description. Get the black version specifically, as it saves you an extra step later and doesn't have green lighting leaking onto the characters. To install this, open your Strive directory and then go to Red, Content, Packs, and make a new folder called ~mods. Drag in the .pack and .sig from the mods zip and you're done. The next thing you'll need is Intel's Graphics Frame Analyzer, which is also linked in the description. After installing the Graphics Frame Analyzer, you'll have a few programs. The Graphics Monitor, which you'll use to capture frames from the game. The Graphics Frame Analyzer, which you'll use to open those frames after you capture them. And the Graphics Trace Analyzer, which you can ignore. Open the Graphics Monitor and Frame Analyzer. In the Graphics Monitor window, open the settings at the top right and make sure Auto Detect Launched Applications is turned on. You can also switch to the dark color scheme here. Make sure the capture file's location is somewhere with ample space, as each captured frame is around 250 megabytes, and they add up fast. If you set a different folder from the default, go to the Graphics Frame Analyzer window and add the directory there. Then open the options at the bottom left and go to the Shortcuts tab. Set your capture frame shortcut to something comfortable. I prefer using 4 and controlling Strive with my keyboard. You can close the graphics monitor for now. It will run in the background. Now, launch Strive. If the graphics monitor is working, you should see a frame counter at the top left. Go into training mode and be sure to select the forest stage. If you haven't already, hide the UI by going to Training Settings, Display Settings, and then setting everything to Do Not Display. Now, just do a move and press the hotkey you set earlier. You should see a pop-up that says Capture Complete, and your game should freeze for a second. Capture frames until you get one you like. If you don't see Capture Complete pop up, make sure you aren't holding other keys while pressing your shortcut, as this will make the shortcut not register. After getting a good capture, switch to the Graphics Frame Analyzer window, and you should see a preview of it. Be sure to delete bad captures as they take up a lot of space. Double-click the capture to open it. I'll do Maze 5K as an example of a simple move with no effects. Ignore everything on the screen right now except for the timeline of draw calls. Think of this like the sequence of events your GPU did to produce the frame. Draw calls early in the timeline will be things like geometry, then later materials and character outlines, then effects, and then finally post-processing. Ignore the purple and green draw calls, as those are things like floats that don't matter to us. If you want the dark theme here, the setting is in the top right. The first step is to get a perfect outline of our character. To make the draw calls more readable, change the chart regions setting to render targets. This will group alike draw calls together in brackets. You can then click on the first big bracket in the timeline to easily select all of your geometry. Make sure you change selected calls to original and other calls to hide. Now, only the draw calls you have selected will show up in the preview. This will be helpful if you need to find certain objects. Control-click on the next big bracket in the timeline to also include the cell-shaded outlines on the character. And make sure you're in the DSV view here. Now you can click Save Texture to File and save this to a folder as depth.png. Then go to the last draw call in the timeline. This will be the final image. Export this to the same folder as final.png. Now open Photoshop. If you don't have Photoshop, it's free. If you don't want to torrent stuff, but still want to follow along, you can go to photop.com, which is an online and free recreation of Photoshop's entire toolset. Link is in the description. In Photoshop or Photop, drag in both the depth and final PNGs. Right-click on the final layer and rasterize it. double click on the depth layer and set Blend If Gray for this layer to 2. Right-click the depth layer and convert it to a smart object. Now, control-click the preview to select the pixels in the layer. At the top of the screen, go to Select and click Inverse. Click on the final layer and then press the Delete key. Now you can hide the depth layer and delete the training dummy. I use the polygonal selection tool for this. To get a perfect crop, control-click the preview for the final layer. Then at the top, go to Image and then Crop. And now you have your completed image, which you can save wherever. Let's do a different move with something in the frame I want to delete. For this, I'll use Ramlethal's 5K. As you can see, Ram's swords are in the way, but since we have all the draw calls here, we can delete them. For this, it would be helpful to change the chart regions to shader sets. Now, things that are shaded alike will be grouped together. Just by looking at the geometry section, I can see a couple groups of 2s. Those are probably Ram's swords. I can control-click on these brackets to add them to my current selection, and control-click them again to remove them from my current selection. Make sure selected calls are on original and other calls are on hide, or you'll see every draw call, not just what you have selected. You can also add and subtract individual draw calls to your selection by control-clicking on them. Once you have everything that you don't want in your final image selected, click on State. Now, change the right mask to mask_0 and change the func to comparison_never. If you select all of your geometry again, you'll see that Soul and the swords are gone. I can then go to where the materials are and do the same process here. After I have the draw calls that I don't want selected, I can go to State and change the right mask to mask_0 and change the func to comparison_never. Now if I go to the final image, it's like Ram's swords and soul never existed. If you can't see State while you have draw call selected, you might have a green or purple draw call in your selection that's getting in the way. If you can see the State menu but don't see right mask or func, you have to set depth to on yourself. An alternative way of deleting things is in the State menu, scrolling down on the right side and changing the width or height under viewport to 0. If you want to only keep 1 or 2 draw calls from a large group, it might be easier to select what you want and then control-click on the bracket to invert your selection. Then you'll only have the things you don't want rendered selected. To find materials without trial and error, you can also just select them all and then click on a pixel in the RTV view. This will highlight draw calls that touch that selected pixel, making it easier to find specific things. To get out of the pixel history view, click API log next to the pixel history on the left of the screen. After getting rid of things you don't want, the process is the same as before. Select all of your materials and geometry and switch to the DSV view. Click Save Texture to File and save this as depth.png. Then go to the final draw call and save it as final.png. From here, the process in Photoshop is the same as 4 minutes and 46 seconds, as long as there's no effects. If your move has effects, there's an extra step. For this example, I'll use Ramlethal's 214H, as it's pretty effect heavy. First, I'll get rid of Soul using the methods described at 5 minutes and 47 seconds. Then, I'll select all of my geometry and materials and save the DSV view as depth.png. Next, I'll select all the effects on the timeline, and in the RTV view, change the color to RGBA. I'll then save this as fx_alpha.png. You don't have to, but if you want to remake the glow effects in Photoshop, you'll also want to find the individual draw calls for effects that glow and export them in RGBA on their own. I'll save the green sword / effects to their own PNG. Save the final draw call as final.png. Now, in Photoshop or Photop, drag in your final.png, your depth.png, and your fxalpha.png. You can hide the fxalpha for now. Right-click on the final layer and rasterize it. Right-click on your final layer and duplicate it. You can hide the copy for now. Double-click on the depth layer and set Blend If Gray for this layer to 2 and click OK. Right-click on the depth layer and convert it to a smart object. Now, Control-click the preview to select the pixels in the layer. At the top of the screen, go to Select and click Inverse. Click on the final layer and then press the Delete key. You can hide the depth layer now. Now you have a cutout of your character and solid shaded effects, but not the effects with transparency. Unhide your fxalpha layer and your final copy layer. Control-click on the preview for fxalpha, then hide the layer. Select your final copy layer and press the Delete key. Now, all of your effects are here with transparency. The next step is for adding glow effects back in. It's optional in my opinion, but I'll still show you how to do it. You'll need to drag in the fx_alpha PNGs of your effects with glow that you saved individually, and drag in another copy of your final.png. Rasterize the final.png you just dragged in. Control-click on the fxalpha preview, select your final layer, and then press the Delete key. Now you can hide the fxalpha layer. Double-click the final layer and turn on Outer Glow. Set the blend mode to Screen and set the color to something close to the effect. I'll mess around with these values until it looks good enough and hit OK. To see your glows better, click the New Adjustment Layer button in your Layers panel and then click Solid Color. Make sure this is the bottom layer and hide it when you're done. To get a good crop, I like to first group everything, then duplicate the group. Hide one of these, as it's just there to save our work in case we make changes later. Select everything in the group and right-click, then Merge Layers. Then, Control-click on the preview and go to Image, then Crop. Sometimes it's not cropped tight enough, so feel free to crop it more. I like to select the part of the frame I don't want, then go to Selection and Inverse, then I crop. I'd save this as a PSD since it's more complex and I might want to make changes to it later. I'll also export this finished move as a PNG to upload to Dustloop. You can also use this method for hitbox images. You just need an extra step. I'm using the hitbox viewer linked in the description. Usage instructions are on the GitHub. For this example, I'll use Ramathal's /. When you capture a frame with the hitbox viewer, hitboxes are added to the frame last. They're easy to select if you have chart regions set to shader sets, as they'll be grouped together. I'll make my base image using the methods described earlier, ignoring the hitboxes at the end for now. Now, I can add the hitboxes. Select the group of hitboxes and save them twice, once as RGBA for the outlines, and again as RGB for the fills. I'll name these Outline and Fill. In Photoshop, drag in your Outline and Fill PNGs. Double-click the Fill PNG and increase Blend If Gray for this layer until just the black background is gone. 2 works for me here. Now select the Fill PNG and at the top of the screen go to Image, Adjustments, and then Brightness Contrast. Add 150 brightness and hit OK. Go back to the Brightness Contrast menu and add another 100 brightness. Now lower the opacity of the fill layer to 50% in your Layers panel. Now I'll delete the training dummy from all the layers, if I didn't already do so with the Intel tool. If you can't press delete, you have to rasterize the layer first. Control-click on the final layer preview, and then Control-Shift-click on the outline preview. Then go to Image and Crop. Now I can save this as a PNG twice, once while hiding the outline and fill PNGs, and once with them unhidden. These will be cropped the same on Dust Loop, and look nice switching from image to hitbox views there. What if an effect doesn't have transparency? For example, in Ramathal's Morto Bato, the orb she's holding in her hands doesn't have any transparency. For effects like these, I export them to their own PNGs in RGB, leaving them out of the FX Alpha PNG. Then I add them in Photoshop and change their blend if gray value to get rid of their background. I punched a hole through this orb, but I can fix it by first converting the layer to a smart object, then double-clicking the preview. Now I'm in the smart object, and I can add a layer under the orb and draw a bit of black with the brush tool. I can Ctrl S to save the smart object and go back to my other PSD. I also used this method to add in the green electricity effects to Ram's swords. For really simple effects with no transparency, like the colored orb seen in this example, I won't bother trying to get them from the draw calls, and just remake them with the brush tool and transparency in Photoshop. I hope this tutorial was easy to follow, and if you have any questions about it, my Discord is chootloops7777. It's a bit more work than other methods, but I think the results speak for themselves.